So, artificial intelligence, it's the new buzzword. It's all over the campus, and we're discussing it here today with Ray Bilodeau, one of the professors that teaches in the MBA program here at Cape Breton University. Hi, Ray.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me.
Very glad to have you here. This is an exciting topic. It's an exciting time. It's causing a little bit of excitement, a little bit of mayhem in some cases. So I thought we'd sit down with some of the professors and some of the instructors here at Cape Breton University and discuss the topic of artificial intelligence and its impact and what it means for academic life, I guess, across North America, across the world. Let's start off by maybe introducing yourself. I think our viewers here would like to know a little bit more about you and what you've been doing for the students and the rest of the faculty here at Cape Breton University.
Yeah, so I've been teaching in post-secondary for about 18 years, and I've really always been fascinated with technology as related to marketing traditionally, but we've been seeing this emergence of artificial intelligence for quite some time now. I remember reading a book called On Intelligence by Jeff Hawkins. Man, this was probably 20 years ago, where he was trying to determine how an artificial intelligence might work, given that it can't possibly be a million lines of code. And I've always been fascinated with this idea of artificial intelligence and how much it could help us or not help us. And so anyway, and particularly as related to marketing, because it's my background, it's been really a wonderful evolution to see for years, and even before the explosion of ChatGPT, kind of in December of 2022, I was still playing with other tools such as Copy.ai, and so it's been really interesting. It's been fascinating, but I mean that's technology, right? I mean this feels like it could be kind of like another moment like social media shifted powers from institutions to individuals. And I think it was Rupert Murdoch that said you'd have to go back to the days of the printing press to really see that kind of shift in power from institutions to individuals the way we saw with social media. This feels similar to me. And I say that because the shift in power is you shouldn't need a whole bunch of designers, experience with Adobe, experience with a whole bunch of other software programs in order to express yourself in your own individuality and your creativity. And I think that's the fascinating part of this is empowering individuals. And that's, obviously people are going to be a little bit worried about artificial intelligence. But I think there's a great opportunity here as well if done right.
That seems like a good point. To a certain extent, we had handed power off to experts in technical fields, like people that knew how to use creative software like Adobe Photoshop or knew how to code or program. And we have a situation now where we've got users creating content without a lot of technical expertise. Although I'm sure the more that they get experience with it, their proficiency will increase. But that's a good point. We've got a shift in maybe control of the media and the technology happening with artificial intelligence. I can see this discussion going, I think, in two different directions, being split between, I mean, based on your background and your experience, I think I've got some opinions on implications for artificial intelligence in the marketplace, in consumer corporate Canada. And we've got the implications for artificial intelligence within academia. So your experience might straddle two of those. So if I could be, I guess, indulgent enough, maybe we'll explore both of those paths along the way. Maybe we can start with maybe the public-facing side or the market-facing side. What do you see, or continue to tell me about what you see as the difference in the marketplace or for consumers, for people in the marketing profession, people in business, with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I think again the opportunity to express oneself or to see something come to life that you envision has never been greater. And I'll give you an example. My son, when he was 10, plays hockey, Canadian thing to do, and he designed the logo or the crest for his hockey team. And it wasn't that he just entered in one thing and out came the logo, and then we sent that logo to the team to vote on. He spent hours playing with different logos and trying different prompts and seeing what the results would look like and the colors, and it was interesting for me as a parent to go back and see this history of different iterations of the logo he was trying to create. And then for him, he was able to, once he found one that he really liked, bring it to the team, and the team voted with like four other logos that would probably be the traditional way that you would do things. You get things off the internet, or you use other NHL team logos, and the team voted for his logo, which was great. I mean, and he's 10. So the reality is that he was able to express himself. And again, the goal isn't to just it wasn't just to just enter one prompt and out comes the result, but he was able to experiment with it, and through a number of iterations come arrive at this, aha, this is what I envision, this is what I want to bring to the team, this is what I feel like would be really great for our team. And so in industry, I think there's going to be more and more of that kind of opportunity. But I think that the limiting factor, or the caution, is that you cannot rely on the artificial intelligence to have all of the data, because it's not. And I don't know. Do you want to do a little experiment with me? Would you be
Sure.
open to that?
Yeah.
All right. So can
Live
you?
on the floor, live off the floor. Here we go. Experiment number one.
So if I said to you, "C blank T," can you fill in the blank? And everybody out there can do this. Everybody
C
out there who's
blank
watching,
T,
C
cut,
blank
CUT.
T. Caught. Good.
Yeah.
For a lot of your viewers, they're probably feeling a cat because they're spending all day watching cat videos. But for
Okay.
you, you chose caught. So that's interesting. So maybe there's some reason that you chose caught. Maybe you're familiar with caught. You've got a caught in the house. That is the first word that you thought of, and that is your best prediction. And so the second scenario would be ABC
D.
1, 2, 3. Wait, I'm not done.
Oh,
ABC
okay.
one.
Sorry.
Sorry. ABC 1, 2, 3, DEF 4 blank blank. Can you fill in the two blanks?
5, 6.
Which one are you more confident in, the first one or the second one?
What do you mean?
So which one are you more confident about your prediction? Your first one, C blank T, or your second one with 5, 6? Which one are you like? I feel like that's the better choice. I'm more confident
Uh,
in that.
okay. Well, I guess I'll go with the 5, 6 one because there's two elements I'm filling in. So
Good. And you could see more of a pattern, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so when we talk about this artificial intelligence and this large language models, that's
Mm,
really all it's doing. It's
yeah.
making predictions and filling in blanks, and you have a context window, and that's more of the information it's able to take into consideration before it
Mm,
makes its next prediction. And so that's a big thing for your viewers to understand, is the context window is going to become more and more important. And right now,
mm,
Claude.ai has the largest context window, that, as I understand it.
mm.
But here's
I'm
the
gonna
trick.
I'm gonna turn this
Sure.
around a little bit. I'll continue, and then I'll come back in.
And so all I just wanted to conclude by saying is that we must use real data and other sources of data and stack that real data, brainstorm with the AI, but never forget the AI is not the source of all information. It's really good at wordsmithing and brainstorming, but you've got to bring in other sources of information. At the same time, always be careful about including any proprietary data, any confidential information, because you are training a large language model, and anything you introduce to it, ask it a question about, becomes part of the training data that might be revealed somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. The version of that experiment that I was familiar with, the fill in the blank example, was give me the next word. When I give you the phrase, my big fat Greek, what's the next word? My big
Wedding. I was
wedding.
trying to be more humorous than that, but I failed.
Yeah. So AI is finishing sentences and figuring out probabilities for what the next word is going to be within the context of the subject or the search or the prompt. Um, and it's actually pretty interesting, I guess, from a technical perspective. And I don't want to get too technical in the podcast, but when they first postulated artificial intelligence, the two roads that there were two roads that they had to choose from were large data sets, lots and lots of code, exquisitely explaining and instructing and coding everything so that you had a definitive set of instructions for every scenario. And the other was a neuro model, a neural network model, which would learn and finish and work as AI does now. The original guess, the original money was actually on the large programming model. They worked on that for 30, 40 years, and the people that had an interest in neural networks and the large language model type of AI were sort of pushed to the side. And it's only recently that basically they've more or less come out on top and proved that model was perhaps a more successful model. But at its fundamental core, it's not difficult to understand at its core, very simplified, but at its core, what is happening, where it's auto completing thoughts, phrases, words, as they say within the technology tokens.
Yeah. So I would only add to that based upon Jeff Hawkins and my understanding from Jeff Hawkins, and he's done quite a bit of research around what you're suggesting. But he expressed it, as I understand it, as classify sequence pattern prediction. Classify sequence pattern prediction. And so with your large language model, it's always important to remember that it's trying to classify. And so when you are communicating with your large language model, it's important to say, I have a medical question. I have a marketing question. I have just help the AI classify what it is that you're looking for. Classify sequence pattern prediction. So then tell it the patterns that you're experiencing. It'll then reference the patterns it has, and it does a better job making a prediction because you're helping it to understand. So that's where some of the original prompts were things like act like a marketing instructor, act like, and even I've used prompts where I've said, in marketing in particular, act like David Ogilvy, because he was quite a famous marketer, and or act like this person, and then give me your result based upon that. So classify sequence pattern prediction, just to expand upon what you're saying. That was my understanding from Jeff Hawkins, and a fascinating individual, very much the individual who from 20 years ago didn't believe that we're a million lines of code, but we're something different, and we have to teach and train the artificial intelligence in a different way than just writing a million lines of code.
Yeah, yeah, and I see an understanding of people that are starting to use AI effectively, and understanding that these one-shot prompts, these single ideas, single queries, are not effective or not particularly effective, and the results get better as you get better at prompting and are more specific in your query and your definitions and the words that you use. To the point that, and I did a little bit of experimenting with this, where you can create a background description document, and they do this actually in coding proper with artificial intelligence, where they'll take several pages and they'll create a full description of the program that you're trying to create. The technologies you want to use, the way things look, the format of the screen, what the overall goal of the project is, and then they'll start by saying, okay, execute this background document, but always refer to this in any changes and updates. So it becomes a guiding document. I saw that transferred into being used for individuals. You would create a background document about yourself, your philosophies, your beliefs, books you've read, thoughts you've had, what your understanding of the subject matter is, and then you would go and prompt looking for a solution, relying on that background document to sort of give some context to the AI so that it can come back with a more complete and more thoughtful response.
Yeah. So on that note, ChatGPT will actually let you customize the instructions, which it'll take into consideration in all of its answers. And so, what I've done personally is I've changed it from being a blank to, and I've done a couple things here. So, a lot of my instructions to my students, I will intentionally make sure that my language is accessible. And so I've included as my instructions always write at a grade 9 level or below. And then I've also included in there things such as tell me the business understanding of this and try to teach me something as a result of the question asked. And in those custom instructions, so my results are going to be quite a bit different than anyone else's results because of the way I've customized my instructions. And so first, they'll be really accessible linguistically because I'm writing everything coming at me is going to be written at a grade 9 level or below. So if I write an email to my students or if I create an assignment, I know I'm not creating an artificial linguistic barrier to my students' success, but I'm communicating in a way that's more accessible. And hopefully that gets me better results in terms of understanding what my students' critical thinking is. But also the second part where it begins to tell me about business insights. So when I ask it about whatever, like what is a persona? So a persona traditionally is a fictitious representation of a target market. And so in marketing, it's important to create these personas. But with my results from my ChatGPT and my custom instructions, it's going to go deeper than just give me the definition of what is a persona. It's going to say why this matters and practical business use for personas and provide me some additional information, which I want and is specific to my field. And so for everyone out there, so you talked about that background document, which is good provided that context window is big enough again to always take that background document into consideration before it gets you the next response, right? So that's really important. With ChatGPT, it moves that out of that context window, that conversational frame, and it's moving it into the background of always take this into consideration. And I think that's a really interesting way of using ChatGPT, for example, by having those custom instructions. And for me, that makes ChatGPT a good AI solution given the number of different, whether you look at Perplexity or Grok or Claude or Gemini, which are the solution that it's providing by allowing me to do the custom instructions brings that ChatGPT model up in my mind in terms of the one I will use more.
Mm-hmm. And I have found differences between the different models. I think I've been using mostly Claude Sonnet and ChatGPT, and for some application development, something called V0. But I've seen differences in these models, in some cases day to day. But each model and each interface has different features available to them. So I think it's in Claude Sonnet that you can create a background document that's persistent through your conversation. I don't think ChatGPT has that, and maybe this week it does. I don't know. If it doesn't, it might be adding it next week because this is a moving target. So I think what I've seen, I just from consumer use, is that communication actually has become even more important in being very specific with your prompts, and including all the information and context that's required to get a meaningful response. So these one-shot prompts, a couple of words, a sentence, half a sentence, really aren't as effective as they can be if you really consider and think about what your actual problem is, what you're actually trying to discover, what you have to bring into the discussion, and provide to the model, to the AI, so it can come back with something more meaningful.
And from a student's perspective, I'm probably unique in the way that I try to encourage the use of artificial intelligence. But from a student's perspective, it becomes very important to make sure you're learning definitions. So in a similar way that we do classified sequence pattern prediction, like the artificial intelligence, sometimes we'll see a word and we'll just gloss over it because we understand the rest of the context of the sentence. I think from a student learning point of view, we should stop and learn that word, because that word, just like I used the word persona earlier, might help you to have a better conversation with the artificial intelligence, get a better output, and communicate with other people because you understand the terminology and the correct words to use. And you're able to express yourself better to the artificial intelligence, get a better result, and you're better able to communicate that which you wanted to say to whoever you were going to send that message to. So that would be my big takeaway in this day and age. Be very intentional about your learning about specific words and learn the language of your field. Classify sequence pattern prediction. Learn the language of marketing. Learn the language of accounting. Learn the language, because there's nuances to some of the words, and you don't want to gloss those over, particularly in this day and age, because the AI is going to be familiar with a lot of these words. And that's the other component, is the language. I think our language will continue to evolve probably at a much faster rate as we're finding new words and start to use new words, and that perhaps the artificial intelligence understands or can define. And it's like, oh, I didn't know. Like, for example, the word memist. Well, memist is a word used by Reddit. And so because a lot of these large language models will scrape terminology from Reddit, the artificial intelligence is familiar with the word memist, even though it's not in the traditional dictionary. And so that's a few large language models are going to look at sources not only online, but online on Reddit and these social media platforms. And that's where Grok is going to try to be different, which is Elon Musk's version, because it's going to use Twitter conversations as its sources of information, as part of its sources of information. And so we start to see the emergence of a few different artificial intelligence as each one will progress towards this artificial general intelligence, would being the ultimate goal, where you're not asking questions. It's the artificial general intelligence that basically is aware of the situation and is providing solutions for the situation before you ask the question, in anticipation. The AGI which will be probably the next phase, but you can start to see how different AGIs will begin to emerge because of the sources of information will be different.
Okay, so that opens up something to my mind. You've mentioned Grok, you've mentioned ChatGPT, Claude Sonnet, Gemini. These are all models that are either commercial entities, or at the very least, they are not Canadian-centric. They are owned, operated, programmed primarily from the United States. So what does that mean for Canadian discussion? What does that mean if we're not incorporating a Canadian model as one of the options? Are there issues there with maybe sovereignty of our own technological future? Are we prepared to take ownership of that within Canada? or are we just ceding the development of artificial intelligence to either foreign corporations or other foreign entities? What does that mean for Canada in this debate? If based on where we are now, where do you think we are with that?
So one of the artificial intelligence, and I don't know if I'm using the right word here, developers or at the forefront of the use of artificial intelligence is Amy in Edmonton. And so and again, we're using a lot of US examples because they're very accessible on for consumers, and so we use them quite a bit. But from the Canadian point of view, there's Amy, and I forget the main fellow's name right now. He is a. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to use an AI to help me maybe find
Perfect.
that. But oh, who is the?
Because there is a
So he.
Chinese model. The Europeans are working on a model. I haven't heard of a Canadian example.
Oh wow! Do you? So he just won the Turing Award. Are you familiar with? I think it's called the Turing Award.
Turing?
Tour, yeah.
Turing.
So he just won that. Richard Sutton. Richard Sutton is kind of the lead behind Amy in Edmonton, and yeah. So for your audience, he would be someone to look at and follow in this space, and he's a fascinating individual. And so around him, because he's such a leader in the field, my understanding is he's attracted other folks in the field to Edmonton to come work with him, and they've created this company called Amy. And the idea Amy is that it works with um, so it works with businesses and universities to try to create artificial intelligence solutions for your problems. And at the end of the day, they leave that for you. And I had the pleasure of attending an Amy conference just a couple months ago now, and it was fascinating. Just lots of entrepreneurs, what's happening in healthcare and artificial intelligence in Canada. Google. So at that time, Google had Google Canada had offered some sponsorship money to some post-secondaries to basically hire Amy. So the money would come from Google, would go to Amy, and it was to help post-secondaries implement artificial intelligence in different courses. And the goal being is that I think Google made a very, I think their goal was to impact or touch 200 to 250,000 students through this funding and the development with partnership with Amy and post-secondaries in order to make artificial intelligence more accessible in Canada. And that's this through this Richard Sutton led organization. And he himself is a fascinating individual. And so that would be probably a really great news Canadian story. And I believe, yeah, anyway, he's a fascinating individual in and of himself. And I would recommend perhaps on a later podcast to bring him in, because he is someone definitely worth speaking to, and who's he's just a fascinating individual. I greatly enjoy listening to him because he's got a view of the future that looks interesting.
I'm going to put him on my list. Maybe see if I can get him on the show.
Richard Sutton, yeah,
Richard Sutton out of Edmonton.
yeah.
Okay, fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. This is why we're here. This is the kind of interaction that we're hoping to engender here. Something I found that I think within the university, with any big institution, really, you've got Unfortunately, silos, you have a large number of people, they naturally coalesce into different groups or schools or cohorts, and often they don't get a chance to actually connect with each other. And that's exactly what I think I'm trying to do here with this podcast, is to produce this series and talk to people in different fields within university, within the academic field, and have them start sharing ideas. So that's really
Very
good.
admirable goal, and I appreciate you doing it, because you're absolutely correct. Just being in isolation isn't helping, right? We need to communicate with one another and understand things and understand where we are, and then not be afraid of the technology. But I, like, for me, I'm all about embracing technology, and I want my students to embrace technology, because I want them to use the technology in order for them to achieve whatever they're trying to do and be as best as they can be.
Yeah, and I've said for a while, one of the unfair aspects of, I guess, an academic education, for both the students and professors and administration alike, your semester, your term, 12, 13 weeks long, you got 24 weeks worth of content to jam into 12, and it's a challenge at the best of times. So you don't have often a chance to pop your head above water and have a look around and see what's going on. So I'm hoping that discussions like this, will be able to sort of fill in some of those gaps. Leading into I guess, the academic portion of this discussion, maybe I can ask you, like, what are you doing in your classes that I guess you're doing to incorporate AI and further your students' understanding of the technology and what lies ahead for them in the future?
Excellent question. So there's two paths I'm going to take you on. One is in terms of assessing student understanding, which I think has to evolve quite a bit, given that the ubiquitous nature of artificial intelligence. We have to take a step back and say, well, wait, those traditional exams aren't working like they used to assess student understanding, because there's just so much artificial intelligence. We need a better way than some of those traditional exams. So in the classroom, in terms of my assessments, I'm relying more and more on this format, where the student will show me on a video their discoveries, their learnings, their insights, what they've created, and discuss it in the video. So that, and what I'm trying to get away from here is the use of artificial intelligence to generate a paper, and that's not the goal. Their students are welcome to brainstorm with the artificial intelligence. They're welcome to use the artificial intelligence to make those ideas come to life. I want to hear from them and their insights, their critical thinking in the assessment, so that I can better determine whether or not they've achieved the course outcomes. So that's kind of the assessment side of it. And then in terms of the use of it as applied to industry, just kind of going back to something I said before, is I'm being very intentional in exposing my students to different tools uh, to use to get data, and public tools. So I'm not, again, I'm going to be cautious about not, making them aware of the fact you don't want to use proprietary data and introduce that proprietary data into the large learning model, because that becomes public data, and that's not what you want to do. But where you have, like, Google keywords related to your field, Google trends related to trends that are happening, or backlinks that maybe you discover in Uber Suggest, or vidIQ, and you're looking at revenue per thousand views of this channel as opposed to this channel, and you're able to stack and access these other sources of information, and then bring that information into the artificial intelligence, and let the artificial intelligence act like that data scientist as your personal assistant, and say, help me understand this. This is my business problem. This is what I'm seeing in the data. What insights can you help me to gain based upon this sort of data set? And what actionable insights do you see? What might be the next steps? And to kind of go back and forth there. But what is critical from a student point of view is that, again, we begin to understand to bring into the conversation with the artificial intelligence, with classmates, other sources of data, and that becomes critical. And when we think about making sure, I want to discuss something like plagiarism, but I want to do it in a way that I don't want to make it as a punishing thing, but what I want my students to understand is I want you to substantiate your point of view. So if you give any facts beyond common knowledge or direct quotations, include an in-text citation that shows me where that comes from. Because I think we are all becoming more familiar with the fact that sometimes the artificial intelligence will hallucinate, include in links to journal articles that don't actually exist, or data that's not true. And so anytime you're introducing facts beyond common knowledge or direct quotations, it's always important to have that in-text citation, even to say, I got this piece of information from Google Trends, from Google Keywords. And then somebody who reads that paper, like myself, or somebody, if you choose to publish it publicly, can replicate that whatever you did in order to make that discovery. And I think in that way we teach our students the scientific process, um, in a very positive way. We should be able to replicate or duplicate that data discovery, and then with that understanding, maybe we can find the new up-to-date data based upon that same methodology. I don't know. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. Maybe
So
if I can dig into a couple of pieces of it. So the first thing you indicated was that you're relying a little bit less on written assignments, and you're asking students to submit video reports. Can I call it that? A video report, instead of having a written paper. And with that, you're gaining an insight into what they actually know, because they're actually presenting it, well, not live, but on camera, real time, and you get a sense that they have, from some source, whatever the source is, have researched, understood, digested, and can actually hold or present a bit of a discussion on whatever the topic is. So just on that, just to kind of fill in a couple blanks, when you create an assignment like that. As far as the submission, are you saying give me a 5 minute presentation, a 5 minute video, a 3 minute video? Like what do you typically lean on for those kinds of evaluation metrics tools?
so I've made mistakes, and I didn't have time limits, and oh boy, uh, as an instructor, I love my students' enthusiasm, but I have to be a little bit conscious of getting them some feedback back at an appropriate time. And so if you don't set parameters around how long these things can be, sometimes they will go off into half an hour. I've had videos submitted which were hours in length. And so I've kind of narrowed that down to typically I like to have about a 5 minute video. Oftentimes I will yeah, I'll say to them, look, your job is to present your findings, be clear and be concise and be intentional about what you're saying. And if that means to do a retake of it because halfway through the video you spend 20 minutes trying to solve an IT issue, then do the retake, um, and just be. And I think that's good practice too, because in some ways we're learning to be respectful of one another's time. Like even in this conversation, for all your viewers, and this is my marketer coming out in me, the the first exchange for with a client or with someone is time for content. And so we don't want to be ripping people off because we're wasting their time, because people are like, man, I feel like whenever I meet with that person, it's a rip off of my time. Or even as a brand, man, I don't like that brand's content. I feel like it didn't really inform and educate me. It didn't really I didn't get any further ahead, didn't entertain me or anything. I don't like that brand. It wastes my time. And you have to be careful about that, because suddenly your brand is dropping and your brand preference is going down, your brand equity is going down, And it's like, wait a minute, why? They haven't even experienced my product. No, I didn't have to. You ripped me off for my time. And so I don't like your brand already. And that's something you have to be aware of. That first exchange, time for content.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I recall I listened to Terry O'Reilly and his advertising show or on the CBC, and one of the early episodes or early seasons, he said that there's an actual contract, an exchange between the audience, the viewer, and the brand with the commercial, and the audience, the customer, trades off their time watching the commercial in exchange for something. Oftentimes, it's a little story, a joke, something witty. But in essence, the advertisement is an exchange. It's a contract, a relationship, and what you're suggesting there as well, I guess, to extend that, is that the content that's being produced on this show and in your submissions has to be worthwhile as well. And if I could drag in another thought, just these ping pong things that bounce around my head, I recall the quote or the response to a letter where I forget who wrote this, but they apologized for the length of their letter because they didn't have enough time to write a short one. So
Isn't that the truth?
actually, that is the truth. That is the truth. In order to create a short communication, you actually have to take your long rambling, uh, long rambling speech, your long rambling conversation, and turn that into a series of short, concise, direct ideas, which is a skill used professionally in industry, in academia. So by asking students to do that, to package their thoughts in a very concise, appropriate manner, there's validity in that. And probably I would say as much validity as the writing of an actual paper, 10 pages, 5 pages, 2,000 words, whatever that may be. You're giving them a frame within to work. This frame just happens to be in a video format. And my last thought, as you were speaking there, I had all kinds of little ideas running through my head. We're now living in a world where it's probably fair to assume that everybody in your classroom has a smartphone. So they have a video production studio, and they can just whip that phone out and they can use that as their technical means in order to produce their submission. So it's probably fair to say that it's as easy to say that all of our students, maybe not completely, but I'd climb out on the ledge to say it's almost as easy to predict that they all have a smartphone, as easily as to say that they would have a pencil and paper. In fact, they probably don't even really have a pencil. The technical capacity to produce something, whether it be in their pocket or sitting in the studio that I'm in right now, like Cape Breton University actually has a few places where you could sit down with university equipment and you could record something. So there really shouldn't be a technical barrier there to doing what you're asking. And if there is a technical barrier, maybe someone could do a live presentation to you or something like that. You could accommodate, I'm sure. But Ray, I think that's a good suggestion and relevant in our modern situation. Getting on to the content side of it, and plagiarism is the big topic of discussion in the academic setting. Maybe you could talk a little bit more, or tell me a little bit more about how you deal with or ascertain what level of plagiarism. Who was it that said, is Pablo Picasso, that copying is the most sincere form of plagiarism or something like that? I just forget the
Flattery.
exact phrase. Flattery, yeah.
Flattery.
Yeah. So anyway, what are your thoughts on your cautions for plagiarism in the modern AI classroom?
Yeah. So primarily what I've stated, which is facts beyond common knowledge or direct quotations should have an in-text citation. And again, what I want my students to do is I want them to substantiate their point of view, to say, look, this isn't just my opinion, but this is the opinion of perhaps this other quote from this other researcher or from this academic paper or whatever your source is. Maybe it's a website. Here, this fact beyond common knowledge came from here. this idea is supported by these folks. And I think that's good, like in the sense that everybody has an opinion. We should be in the habit of substantiating ours. And so if you want to be more credible, we should be substantiating those things that we write, those things that we present. So in the student presentations, to say, aha, so here I am on Google Trends, and you can clearly see in the data when I select Canada and this time period and this particular keyword, here's how this trend looks. But it's not, I think maybe it's like, here it is, and you're welcome to go and look it up for yourselves. And I hope you've learned this tool, Google Trends, for example, can be used in your own individual context. And that's the wonderful thing is when you start to show people the in-text citations, you start to show people the sources, they can go back to those original sources and gain a deeper insight, perhaps, of something that's of interest to them. You know, when we're writing a blog, even, we're hyperlinking keywords, those key definitions will hyperlink back to the original source that you understand that word to mean. And that's super important. So sometimes we write some words, and I was talking about definitions earlier, but it becomes really important to understand those words and to make sure our audience understands what that word means when you say that word. And that's so traditionally, when we write a blog, traditionally writing a blog, this seems weird, but we'll hyperlink that keyword to some source or some definition that you want your audience, the readers of your article, if they're unfamiliar with this word, to be able to go to reference it. And we always have those hyperlinks open in a new window so they don't lose the place on the page that they were reading, but they can go and see what you meant when you used that word. And in fact, that is good for you, but it's also, so then the Google algorithm goes, hey, that keyword, these guys are all pointing at this as being the source whenever this keyword comes up with all these hyperlinks. And then the algorithm begins to understand, well, wait, when somebody searches that keyword, gosh, there's all these blogs pointing at this one source when that keyword is used in blogs or in videos, and they always hyperlink back to this source. So it's a signal to the algorithm even to say, hey, when somebody searches that word, this is what that word means. And so it's good in practice to do those kind of backlinks. And we do it all the time as human beings, right? So if we don't know what to do, what do? We look to see what the rest of the herd is doing. And that kind of social proof to, when you read those reviews online, you're like looking for those social proof to say, this is a good restaurant, that's a good movie. You don't even know the people, but you trust that the herd, in giving their reviews, have demonstrated that, hey, this is a good, or that's a bad movie, that's a bad restaurant, this is a good restaurant, this would be really worth your time. Well, the algorithm's doing the same thing. The algorithm's looking for those backlinks to say, hey, where's the good definition of this word? Where's the good restaurant when people searching this? And the algorithm's looking for these backlinks and increasing the domain authority of the result, as a result of all these backlinks. Anyway, I probably went off topic there a little bit, but you asked not
It's
to
all
go
good. It's all
technical, and
good.
here's where we are.
So, and there is an amazing amount of data, especially within a business context. But there's an amazing amount of data publicly available, literally by pushing a button. You mentioned Google Trends, but one of, I'm sure, a million different data sources that is available now. That if I even go back 20 years, maybe 20, 25, and definitely 30, 40. If you had assigned a project to a student back in 1985, the resources that they had available in order to complete that project, coming up with meaningful market research and a recommendation or whatever was required of the assignment, was restricted. Student was going to a library, picking up a book that was probably at least 5 or 10 years old,
Must
and
be.
relying on relying on that. It's just by nature. Like if you wanted to
Yeah.
publish a book in 1985 and started today, it would take you 2 or 3 years to get it published.
Yeah, and
And
you're basing it upon those assumptions from that book rather than in this day and age, we can test things relatively quickly. So I don't have to rely on the color. You telling me 20 years ago the color blue is for trust, and it's going to help me sell on my website. I'll just create an A/B test, one with blue and one with red, and if the red background creates more conversions and has more folks, then we're running with red. Why? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It seems to work.
but and the students now have that. So is it fair to say that that you're expecting them to use those tools, and you're actually expecting a higher level of degree of insight or performance or better quality submissions based on the fact that we really do have so much readily available, and in a lot of cases, pre-digested, pre-summarized, already with opinions and references online for stuff that like information that may have been literally published yesterday might have 15 or 20 people that have commented on the report or on the data, and you can come away with a breadth of insight into their topic. So with the students having that available, what's your expectation of their assignments? Like, what do you like to see?
So and I think the biggest expectation is on myself. I must bring and expose my students to the tools for them to be successful. So it's really important. So you mentioned this podcast can help us collaborate and we can learn from each other. And that is the greatest thing that we can do is us as instructors and professors to learn about these things in order to bring that back to the classroom. That it is so important to be up to date in terms of one subject matter area. And so for me, to your point, I'm saying use this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool. And so, for example, there's a tool called Spark Toro that I like to use for developing these personas because you can see people's behaviors and you can find people based upon they have this word in their profile, they search this keyword, they regularly visit this website, and they give you. So this tool is really a unique tool in that it provides you information about, okay, people who search this word, people who visit this website, people who have this word in their profile, engineer, they also typically listen to these top 10. These are the top podcasts they listen to. And they'll give you affinity. Like, so 90% of the 40,000 people we found living in Canada with the word engineer, 90% of them listen to this podcast, or only 10% of them listen to this podcast. They also go to this YouTube channel. These are the YouTube channels they go to, and these are the percentages. This is where they go for their their news and source of information. And here's some of the topics that they're searching and interested in. And so that's Spark Toro. And we can use other tools like Answer the Public to kind of say, okay, well, what are other questions being searched when people search this questions from that same person? So when they're searching for this, they also search for all of these other things. So Answer the Public and also asked our tools to do that. And you mentioned already Google Trends and Google AdWords and Uber Suggest. It's like, so, but the trick is, I have a responsibility to understand and experiment with these tools and then bring it to the students so they have a better opportunity to find the information to solve the problem. I often ask my students to bring with them a business question or something they're curious about, and then to apply the tools to solve that issue that they're concerned about in a meaningful way and that they get real data, and then they can solve the problem. Then we'll use a tool like Hemingway app to make sure. I mentioned already that I'll use my chat GPT and I'll make sure the readability makes it super accessible, but we'll use a tool like Hemingway app and you can see the readability of the answer. You can look at the difficult words and you can say, wait a minute, this sentence has got like too many ideas in it. It's like a postgraduate level paragraph. I need to make this more linguistically accessible. And you can even see using Hemingway app to see how long it's going to take to read that. So boy, we're stacking 4 or 5 tools. And if you want to brainstorm with an artificial intelligence, that's the sixth tool. And then you get your output, and now you can move it into Hemingway app to smooth it out. And then if you want to introduce that in another language with you saying it, we'll use another tool called HeyGen, where you can talk in English and the artificial intelligence will move your mouth and translate it into another language, but it looks like you're actually saying that in a different language. So if your target audience in Canada, we're such a beautiful mosaic of other cultures that it's incredible for you as the spokesperson for your organization to speak the language of whichever culture your target market is and say those things that you want to say without hiring someone. I mean, even like Mr. Beast, for example, he creates all these videos and he hires actors to voice over uh, his character. We are using a tool like HeyGen. He doesn't have to even do that anymore. He just uploads his video, and the video will have him speaking that other language and be moving his lips so that he can match that in whatever language he wants. And again, now his content is more accessible worldwide by doing that. And I think that's a fascinating age we're moving into. Even in this conversation you and I are having, we are only a small step away from anyone being able to watch this in any language that they choose, and it would still be you and I speaking, you and I mannerisms, you and I, it would be our mouths moving, saying those words. I mean, that technology exists today in HeyGen. In fact, I had used it, I think 2 years ago, to translate something I was saying into I think it was Mandarin or Cantonese, I forget which now. Um, but it was really good. And not that I could even tell it was really good. I asked folks who could speak Mandarin and Cantonese, does this make any sense? And they're like, actually, it's really good. So that technology is there and it's fascinating. But I mean, what a wonderful age we're living in. And don't forget, it was the NVIDIA CEO and the Google CEO that were talking about Moore's Law and the way that technology would grow exponentially about every 18 months. And when Moore created this in probably about 1967, he anticipated this doubling to occur every 18 months kind of thing. And this is where the whole idea, which would you rather have, $100,000 a day for 30 days or the penny that doubles every day for 30 days? And it turns out you'd way rather have the penny that doubles every day, because that kind of exponential growth in 30 days becomes really meaningful in the day 29 and day 30. And so when it comes to technology, we're in day 29, day 30. But the wild thing is, and this came from the Google CEO and the NVIDIA CEO, they both said what we're seeing in regards to Moore's law is we're seeing that exponential growth continue. But what we don't understand is that exponential growth appears to be happening every 6 months, not every 2 years. So when we talk about this artificial intelligence, please don't think it's stagnant or it's stationary or now I've got a handle on it, so therefore I'm set. No, this is growing exponentially, what appears to be every 6 months. So as much as we're getting a handle on it now, wait 6 months and a year, and it'll have grown. And based upon what these two fellows said, and those guys would probably know, the Google and the NVIDIA CEO, if they're experiencing if they believe it's doubling every 6 months, who am I to say something different? So I mean, by the time a student begins and ends their first year of college, the artificial intelligence will have grown exponentially twice. And that's the thing to remember as well, is that this is not, we are by no means at an endpoint here or at a plateau. No, no, no. The mountain is getting steeper. And this is where I think it's really important for folks to play with this, for folks to experiment with this, and for for just to put your toe in the water. I'll often say to my students, the difference between doing something once and having never done it is massive. And so that's where I'll often try to get my students to like actually run a Facebook assignment, actually run a Facebook campaign, or actually create a Google search ad, actually create a blog, actually create a YouTube short, actually create a LinkedIn profile. Doing it once is significantly different than having never done it before. And so I apply that to the use of artificial intelligence. Don't be afraid of it. Try it, and treat it like you would I'm becoming quite conversational, for better or worse. I'm becoming quite conversational with my chat GPT, and the experiment continues.
So fair to say you're a big proponent of the technology. But if I can ask you what what maybe not your greatest fear, but what challenges do you see ahead, or what things do you think we have to be cautious about with this new technology and AI in particular?
Assuming that what the artificial is stating is the correct answer. That is the biggest oops, as I see it. You can't assume that what the artificial intelligence is generating is the correct answer. And it's a really good wordsmith. It's quite articulate, and it's going to understand a lot of words and how to wordsmith that sentence. And there's a lot of good to it, but always, always, always introduce new sources of data. Everyone brings a lot of value in any conversation, and you bring your own insights, you bring your own history, you bring your own background, and those things have meaning. And don't ever assume that that is going to be replaced by the artificial intelligence, because then we've actually lost the mosaic of our country, kind of, which is terrible to say, and maybe it's an exaggeration, but I don't I want to keep the individuality of my students, and I don't want that to become just everybody gives me the same AI answer, and that's good enough, because I don't want to lose the individuals who are wonderful and unique. And I love having assignments where students can kind of express themselves and say, this is my favorite thing, and this is what I really like about that. And there's not just one correct answer. It's in the back of the book, and please don't look there. But because and that's the fear of the artificial intelligence, that everyone will assume there's only one correct answer. It's in the back of the book, please don't look there, and only the artificial intelligence has it. And when the artificial intelligence tells you the correct answer, then that's it. It's over. Well, I've Googled it, or I've searched it on the artificial intelligence, and this is what they said. No, no, that's the fear. That's the fear, is we forget who we are, and we forget that you matter a lot, and your insights, your experience, your critical thinking is what gives you a unique lens. And you're welcome to use your executive assistant, the artificial intelligence, but never lose you in that.
Yeah, I think there would be a shame, as you've said there, that the one answer that artificial intelligence comes back with, or the one answer you get back from the internet or Google, becomes the only possible answer, the only acceptable answer. And I like the way you phrased it, in that there's a diversity of students, and you don't want to lose their individual opinions. So, yeah, so I think that's a valid concern. And I think the way that we approach this as educators, both encouraging the use of modern technology, it's not going away, and in most cases, it's a very efficient way to get through research, understand a variety of topics and information, but that the individual shouldn't be lost in the process, and that your opinions on the subject and what you can bring to the discussion or the research is valid and important and shouldn't be lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and just never assume that whatever the artificial intelligence is presenting to you in way of research is all the research that there is on the matter. In fact, it's probably not. It's just what it's been exposed to so far. But I mean, this is where your critical thinking and your questioning, I wonder when it arrived at that, if it looked at this, and you're welcome to brainstorm with the AI. Did you take this into consideration? Had you considered that? And tell me your sources when you arrived at
Yep.
that conclusion. I mean, that's the kind of questioning and critical thinking we must not lose because of the ease of accessibility of answers. Now it's not even the
Yeah.
answers in the back of the book. Please don't look there. The answer is on your screen when you cut and paste in the
Yep.
question. And why would you question it? Because the artificial intelligence generated it for you.
Yep.
Without critical thinking, we're losing a lot. And so it's
Yep.
because answers are accessible, but that doesn't make them right.
Yeah. If I could provide some context, I was working on a personal project and using AI. It was a coding project. It was an application I was working on, and the AI was getting stuck on a problem, something that it was having a hard time creating. And it kept circulating back, providing the same answer over and over again, or providing the same set of code over and over again. So it was bouncing back and forth between, say, A and B, A and B, A and B, and it wasn't solving the problem that I had, what I was looking to create. So I finally got to the point, and this was a learning experience for me at this point in maybe how to actually help guide and prompt AI as well. I said, okay, this isn't working. I need a solution. It needs to work like this, but don't do this. Don't do the thing that you've been basically recreating for the last 4 days. And it was like, oh yeah, no problem. Here's the solution. Boom, it worked. So it can get fixated on answers as well. So even when you've done your search or you entered your prompt looking for something in AI and it's come back with the solution or an answer, that's not necessarily the only answer. And if you simply ask it, well, what are the other opinions, or what else could this be, or are there any other possibilities? It will come back and provide some other possibilities. So you can't quite take the first reply, the first response to your query, the same way that you shouldn't just go and interview or talk to one person and then write your paper or complete your research or build a company based on that one conversation. Actually, people have done that. It's worked out pretty well sometimes, but build a company based on one conversation. So there's ways to use the tools, and there's pitfalls to be aware of, but also opportunities to learn and to grow. So,
That you just made me think of, it would be interesting to take, I know we used to do case analysis, and it'd be interesting to present or ask the artificial intelligence to say, okay, state your decision criteria, present your different recommendations, and then score out of 10 each of your decision criterias that you use to arrive at the best of the three alternatives you've presented. And then you have that conversation with the artificial intelligence to say, I don't think that decision criteria should weigh that much, or I don't think that would be necessarily the result. So you have to. So in that way, it kind of you can kind of look a little bit more deeply into, okay, what went into arriving at this, and determine for yourself if that was the correct decision criteria, the correct weighting, and then did it arrive at the correct outcome? And by the way, what were the alternatives, and why did we not choose the alternatives? I mean, it would be, just based on our conversation, that would be a fascinating experiment to try with,
Yep.
and I might try that with my artificial intelligence, to say, always give me your decision criteria, and then always present at least three alternatives and then score them according to your decision criteria. You can show me the high score, but I want to know the scores of the decision criteria that you didn't select, the recommendations you didn't select, but
Yep.
always
Yep.
give me your decision criteria. I mean, and
Something else I had. Go
sorry,
ahead.
because that then ties into Is it an environmental solution, right? Where was that in your decision criteria? Those community and economic development things that sometimes your artificial intelligence didn't take into consideration at all, and yet it's super meaningful. So if you don't see the decision criteria, full stop. Look, you're missing one of the key elements. This is so important. I want you to give, and whatever score do you give it, I want you to apply like a 2 times multiplier, because this thing which you had ignored in your original decision criteria is actually extremely important to my target market, extremely important to whomever, and see how that changes the recommendations. The recommendations might remain the same, but it becomes super important to look at the decision criteria. Anyway, this has been a
Yeah.
wonderful topic because I'm learning stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait till you get the bill.
Dang.
There's a danger in following that line of thought up. There's a danger in that response being like a black box answer. You don't know where it came from or what it was predicated on.
And
So
especially if you assume it's correct. If you
yeah,
assume it's correct, now
so
it's really dangerous.
it's worthwhile interrogating the AI to say, well, how was this made? What was the decision making process? Does it take this into account? An experiment I ran at one point, I don't know, a month or two ago. I took some current topic and I asked, I think it was Claude Sonnet. I said, what would John Maynard Keynes think of this? And said, well, John Maynard Keynes would say this. I said, okay, well, how would Adam Smith respond to that? Adam Smith responded to it quite nicely. What would Milton Friedman think of the whole situation? And then, so I created this artificial discussion between 3 dead people, but all based on published work and whatever is out publicly available. And it came back with a discussion that was absolutely remarkable. So yeah, it's worth interrogating and finding out what the AI is coming back and what it's making its responses, what it's building into the data set for its responses, and how that influences the outcome.
And don't lose sight of the fact that you are well read enough to ask those questions. That's critical as well. You've been exposed to other reading. Like, one of my favorite people from history is Maslow, and I love referring back to his thinking and his thoughts. In my heart, I think sociology and psychology have their practical application in marketing. But yes, to be able to say, well, to use your example, how would Maslow reply to this? And I think that's a brilliant way. But you have to be aware of Maslow in order to answer the question, or in order to ask the question. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. In that, and it was an experiment. I wasn't really believing what I was seeing coming back, because it seemed to be creating a number of very thoughtful, relevant, and topical to the speaker, to whoever I was presenting. I asked it in that flow of that conversation, what does John Lennon think of this? Because I was wondering if it was just making, what is it going to make up? What is it going to say? What is it going to say John Lennon's economic model or theory is? And it actually came back and it said, well, John Lennon never really published anything on this topic.
Well,
or
that's
John
good.
Lennon's never. And it proved to me that, okay, well, it's not just making things up. It's aware enough to know that the question I asked wasn't relevant, and there wasn't an answer, so it didn't give me one. Very polite, but it said, no, there's nothing I can tell you about that, or nothing
But it
John
could
Lennon would have said about that.
Maybe it writes you a song about it.
I wonder if I asked if it could write a song by Milton Friedman. What would that be like?
Have you played with any of the song music creating artificial intelligences?
I haven't yet. No.
They're wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're absolutely wonderful. And so in marketing with YouTube, I've heard from some folks who manage YouTube channels that they're actually preferring the artificial intelligence generated music because they avoid copyright strikes by using music that's from an artist, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't even notice that," and I played a little of that. So now, if they use an AI generated music, they're safe from that
Yeah.
copyright.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
that
something.
brings up a whole other level of discussion. But I'm going to leave that for another interview. And
Okay.
I'm going to thank you for agreeing to this to the time for this interview. I've learned a lot, and hopefully our audience takes the time to sort of digest what you've said. And so, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I thank you, because I've kind of changed my thinking on how I want to try some different experiments with my artificial intelligence as a result of this conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Bye for now.